So we're going to keep this short and sweet. One of the things that we know in today's day and age is that people like virtual programs, but at the same time, we have to keep it short, sweet, focused, etc., which is what we're trying to do here. Let me see if I'm going to wait just another minute, and then I'll begin my content and commentary. Though again, I really appreciate everyone's time and effort in trusting me with some of your busy day. And again, our mission, my mission as the head of AngelBeat is how do we make sure that what we're delivering is very meaningful content that can help you in this rapidly changing world. So good, I'll wait another minute, we'll get started. And it's now 11:30, we have to keep things on time. I really want to thank everyone for joining me here today as I now want to formally begin this program. One of the things that we do actively in AngelBeat is deliver meaningful content around the broader theme of sustainability. If you take a look at our website, angelbeat.org, you'll see lots of great content that many individuals have presented. Solar Edge on solar panel design. We've had people talk about new battery technology, maybe zinc. How do you deal with EV charging? Companies like ABB is one of the leading players. All of these challenges. But one of the things that we also do at AngelBeat, what I do, is try and help organizations just prioritize and focus their efforts. And I just want to share some experience. I've been really busy over the course of this year as organizations are grappling with what they want to do. And again, my name's Ron Gerber. I'm the head of AngelBeat. Let me just get right into this. And we want to make some comments about my background, just so you know where I come from and my experience. I've worked in civil engineering. That's my undergraduate degree. It's interesting. My son's now studying engineering. And so I get the chance to relook issues such as environmental engineering, fluid dynamics, all these great things. Also have an MBA, so we can help all of you understand not so much the environmental engineering issues, but how to tie together business issues, lots of corporate experience. And if you take a look at AngelBeat, we've got these programs dealing with sustainability. Again, I encourage people to look at our angelbeat.org website that has lots of valuable content, on-demand information. We also do related programs on data centers, cybersecurity, et cetera. It's interesting, when we started doing programs on technology, a lot of the facilities directors said, this is great, Ron, but energy issues are driving our IT issues now. And so can you do specialized programs, not dealing so much with the technology, but dealing with facilities, operations, which led to creation of our AngelBeat programs many years ago. And in addition to delivering content, we do some specialized consulting services. The whole focus of today's program is my sharing with you some of my insights and experience. And I am hopeful and, let's say, reasonably confident that this will give you some good insights. When you look at our goal today, we just want to make sure it's a very enjoyable, highly positive experience. The days of 4-hour Zooms are long gone. We're going to keep this to 10, 15 minutes of prepared comments with everyone given a chance to ask me questions on how AngelBeat and myself can just give you advice. We ask that people use the Q&A function, if at all possible. I'm going to monitor that. I'll try and maybe stop during my prepared comments, so they're not very long. But please, when you're doing that, just let me know where you work. And if I can unmute you, I always like to hear someone's voice better than just reading what they type in. I've got my phone with me here. If people need to text me or anything like that, we have our angelbeat.org website, where you can go to get much more information, and I'll make these recordings as well as my slides available there. So today is a big day in sustainability, and what I'm doing is holding 3 different programs. This first one is on the related fields of energy and EV charging. They're tied together. Later today, we're going to talk about circular economy and recycling strategies. And then later on, talk about net zero and ESG. These are some of the major themes in sustainability, but we try to group them together because developing your energy strategy is critically important and is intimately tied in with your EV charging plans. All these comments are geared to organizations. This is a B2B company that I run, AngelBeat. It's not so much geared towards B2C, though I can give you advice on my own experience in having 3 cars and what's involved. So let me get just right into it. Now, the big thing when we want to work with organizations, when I give them advice, is whenever you're planning your energy strategy, the key drivers are weather, volatility, and government funding and tax credits. One of the things that I always encourage people to use is focus on weather volatility as opposed to the words climate change. What we found in a number of areas around sustainability is words and selection of words matter. People have different points of view with the word climate change, but with regard to weather volatility and how you deal with that, pretty much everyone agrees to it. You only need to look, my God, who would have ever thought that we've got so much of an impact from Canadian wildfires? Who would have thought so tragically that Lahaina, one of the most beautiful places on earth, is now devastated by wildfires? You can only look at flooding. You can look at actions taken by insurers who are no longer insuring properties, new construction in Florida and other seaborne places where everyone gets it. Whether or not it's man-made or not isn't really the focus here. The issue that we tell everyone is just accept weather volatility, that at least in this day and age is going hotter, that creates all kinds of ancillary impacts, and you have to deal with that. And whether or not you agree with the government or not, it's almost irrelevant. That's what our government is pursuing. There are literally hundreds of billions of dollars available. There are tax incentives, accelerated depreciation that you all need to take advantage of. So when I talk to clients, medium to large employers across all industries, the thing we try and emphasize, or the thing that I do emphasize quite honestly, is first let's say, oh, I just changed something. Let me go back here as I'm just working through all of my Zoom windows here. The first thing we emphasize the importance of decentralization and building up your capabilities to store and produce energy on site. That is critically important. We see it as not only a sustainable program, it's also critical for your business and organizational activities. If you might have read even a few weeks ago, there are communities now that are building huge solar farms, many planned developments, so all of their community can operate correctly. So the first premise is decentralization. People are familiar with the term microgrids, batteries, energy storage, critically important. We're actually almost making a full circle when you look at the world of energy production over the last 150 years. Previously, power plants were very decentralized for towns. Then power plants became very centralized, servicing much larger locations. And now we're seeing a reverse in terms of expanded production on-prem as well as expanded storage. The key things are that needs to be integrated with existing infrastructure, such as backup generators, cybersecurity, et cetera. So now, as you're putting in more of that electrical grid infrastructure, it affects your own operations and can potentially affect the public grid. That's critically important. The other reason for dealing with the public grid, and it's getting back to the whole notion of government funding and issues, because government controls what rates utilities can charge, you've got to enter into agreements where can you offload excess power to the public grid? How do you buy it? How that works? One of the biggest advantages from a sustainability standpoint where we promote this is that you can also use your on-site energy storage, even if you don't have a solar farm, to purchase power off peak during the night. And then a lot of the utilities prefer that because they can reduce the demands on their public grid during peak workloads in these increasingly hot worlds, because you can now power all of your air conditioning if you have more on-premise power storage. Again, our focus isn't really so much utilities. Everyone's aware that every utility is embarking on an embrace and an expansion of their clean and renewable energy sources. They're all making the appropriate transition. We don't really focus on the utility transition plans. We also think it's somewhat tricky to make your organizational priorities based on the kind of energy sourcing that a utility is offering. You have to just, wherever you might be located, you have to accept where their energy is coming from, support them, and at the same time, look at what you can do as far as supporting this. So that's basically the gist of it with energy. It's the key takeaways is you have to dramatically expand what you can do on-prem, on-site, as far as power generation, mainly with solar or mainly with off-peak purchasing off the public grid, and then expand your on-site storage of that so you can power your operations and then do it in a way that's very financially effective in terms of government funding and tax credits. Now we talk about EV charging, which is obviously tied into that. One of the big things that's emerged in the last month or so is there were two different interconnect options. It's similar to VHS and beta. Tesla has won. And so the other advice we give individuals who are involved in organization and facility designs, setting in place strategies for the organization is everything you're building now has to be using the Tesla interconnect standard. If you have an EV like I do that was built in the last year or two that isn't a Tesla, all of those vehicle owners will be able to have connectors that are going to be able to work with Tesla chargers. Obviously, if something's well along in place, you can still put in solutions like, I charge my cars at Electrify America. They have the other charging standard, but it's all going to Tesla. Maybe they'll make it open source technology, which I believe what they're doing. But obviously, the big advantage is to enable many organizations, many vehicle manufacturers and many car drivers to have a much greater flexibility for large scale extended travel. Everyone calls it range anxiety. But when you're looking at priorities, if I'm an organization, there are basically two kinds of charging infrastructure you can pursue. There's the level 3 where you can charge your EV in half an hour or so. There are hundreds of billions allocated, though quite honestly, those are more allocated state and local government, Indian tribes, and also to disadvantaged communities as the DOE determines those geographic locations. As private sector employers, you can look to partner. Maybe you can work and make your facility available to the general public and tap into that. And also, if you're an Electrify America, you can take advantage of these large-scale programs of cooperation. Though, as an organization, the big thing you need to focus on is level 2 charging, where, it's the kind of charging that most people have at their homes, where overnight your car can get a full charge and you can operate. The big thing you need to be aware of is that you're focusing on the employees who work there. And I guess I should have expanded that. It's employees, it's contractors, it's partners, it's visitors who come there. The big thing you also want to look at is how your EV charging affects your ability to deliver energy. In very recent times, especially in California, during their major wildfires of last year, they asked people to stop charging their vehicles until it was late at night because they did not have the capacity to do that. So one of the things that's critically important as you look at what you do on-prem, and we work with a lot of different organizations and they just didn't look at this as intensely, you really need to look at your overall high voltage capabilities, how many amps you can supply at various locations, and how that also works with the public grid. And you have to be aware that some people say, well, what I really want to do is be completely green and just use solar panels to charge all of my EVs for all of my employees. The problem is with current technology, even when you look at solar panels and forecasts or capabilities 5-10 years out, it takes a real lot of space. And even if you've got, let's say, where you can set up in your parking facilities, you can put the solar panels on top, almost provide like a pseudo garage where they're all being charged and provide wind, rain protection. You still won't have nearly enough square footage to really power them. So that's one of the critical things where your EV charging strategy is directly integrated with your energy, is you have to make sure that you've got the capabilities. You need high voltage modeling of your current operations, how you can expand that. And a lot of times people think, well, do I just put a couple of chargers in, I'll buy them and I'm good to go. It's a much more complicated process. That is just the tip of the iceberg. You need to look at many other things. How do you deal with accounting and billing? you might offer it free to employees, but what about contractors and visitors? Are you partnering with the local community so you can take advantage of things like NEVI rebates? You also have to be, again, very aware of cybersecurity considerations now. One of the things that's happening is all of this EV charging infrastructure is all now on what you might call your IP network, your computer systems. It's not just a dedicated chipset that never changes over time. It needs to be constantly monitored. It's got to be tied in with accounting systems. And anytime you're allowing your software, your infrastructure to be updated, it creates a cybersecurity risk. And so you have to be very careful here that you've got the right electrical power infrastructure on-prem and also in the public grid, doing that in the most secure, financially responsible way. So when you look at this, when you take a look at what is, this is what we do at AngelBeat. We have a lot of people ask for my help because they've got multiple operations. They have lots of facility people who are just trying to keep things running. And sometimes they just need someone just to sort through. And again, the complexity grows exponentially with the size of your operations. You've got headquarters, you've got different plants, you've got different jurisdictions. In the end, you need to know for each facility, who is the authority having jurisdiction, who can actually approve this. You've got to make sure you've got the necessary high voltage contractors. You want to have some standardization and some central monitoring. Some of the data that you're collecting has to drive your ability to get rebates, or may actually even flow into your corporate driven ESG requirements. So we see a lot of organizations in this instance, some say, here are the locations, just do all the legwork. Here's what our capabilities are, and write the proposals for us. Perfectly fine. We have a pretty good track record of getting you funding. It's just a tedious, complicated process that we can do for you. The other part of it, we can just provide some feedback. We can help you create your integrated utility energy facility strategy, because again, your energy independence, or I guess a better way of phrasing that is, how do you have greater energy, less reliance on the public grid? All these things are only as good as your weakest link. So that's why you need to make sure that at least someone is looking at all these interdependencies. What's your facility plans? How can you get power? What's the local power authority doing? How can you make sure that you're getting the necessary approvals? What are the safety considerations? What's the long-term plans? Are you going to be there? How do you work with if you're leasing facility, how do you deal with the property manager? All these things that go well beyond simply replacing, let's say, an HVAC cooler or chiller. And when we look at things, we encourage organizations to make sure you're focused on 4 specific areas. It's your on-site power generation and storage. How do you make sure that all of the infrastructure you have, and that is not just limited on-prem, how do you tie all that together? You have to balance it. You have to look at transmission rates, transmission flexibility, pricing, how all that evolves. You want to focus on just level 2 charging, because in virtually all instances, unless you're, let's say, UPS or FedEx, wanting to have level 3 charging for your fleet, because you don't want to charge them overnight, or maybe that is appropriate. You want to focus on level 2. And the other big thing is you are looking at, again, expanding your energy on-prem capabilities and offering greater EV charging infrastructure. The complexity of your facility, your infrastructure grows. You need to be very much aware of maintenance considerations. That's one of the big things. Again, I can just share, some of my experience, which is, whenever I'm getting my vehicles charged when I'm traveling, we go to Electrify America, and most of the time it works, but there are more than a few situations where where they're not working. And so if you're providing this for your workforce, for your partners, the maintenance involved is an often overlooked issue. Again, there's funding for equipment, there's funding for training that all supports this, but you just need to be aware of this. Anyhow, it's lots of excitement. These are my takeaways based on what we're seeing from my work with many leading organizations, what we hear from interacting with government officials, executives, et cetera, this is where we think when you're looking at your energy and EV strategies, what you need to do. And, again, I'm here to answer any questions. We can be engaged for more comprehensive activities. We're going to be doing more programs, or we can give advice if people want, okay, how exactly do I replace all of my current EV charging with Tesla connectors? There's issues with that. What are some of the more reliable activities? What are some of the software programs where I can automatically convert power that's purchased on the public grid at night when there's less demand? What's the best way for storing that on-prem? What are some of the approaches or algorithms for then distributing that power for other usage? How can I make sure that I'm balancing my capabilities for charging vehicles? How can I make sure that doesn't overload my current on-prem infrastructure? I don't want to have charging electric vehicles affect my ability to, keep the lights on, keep air conditioning running. So lots of complexities. Anyhow, that's what we see. I'm glad to answer any questions during the Q&A. If people want advice, you can come back to me. We'll have all of this information available for downloading, but that is my recommendation, what we're seeing from many organizations. Again, our focus isn't as much on public sector organizations, though quite honestly, when you look at this, I think, when you're talking about state and local government agencies, they have the exact same issues. Many, like we did a workshop with Cobb County, their fleet is, I think, in the thousands of vehicles, so they're dealing with the same things. The advantage with government agencies is that they have more immediate access for funding. It doesn't mean you as a private sector employee looking to embrace this or being a real estate developer can't take advantage of this. It just becomes, it's not as immediately obvious and requires some more efforts. All right, I'm going to do this. So we have BHAL. We have a couple of, so first I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go through all of these, and I'm going to ask each of our attendees, if you can. I have Brandy Fernandez. Brandy, can you ask your question here?
Sure.
Where do you work at, Brandy? And thank you so much for joining us.
I'm at Baker Hughes, and I'm in Houston, Texas.
Okay. Oh, it's pretty hot down there, I can tell you that.
Really, really hot.
Got it.
I was just thinking over the long term and thinking circular economy, which a lot of the businesses are, trying to make sure that they're working towards. What are your thoughts on batteries in the future and the recyclability of those, because of the fact that you have to replace those in vehicles several times over the life of the product? Any thoughts there?
Well, I can tell you this, that you just anticipated one of the issues I'm going to be talking about in our next webinar.
Okay.
But that's exactly right. When you look at this, it's a little bit of the computer revolution and the PC revolution 20, 25 years ago. No one thought about what's going to happen with recycling circuit boards and old monitors and things like that. And so the e-waste is a huge issue. Quite honestly, with EVs really only being widely deployed in the last 5-7 years, this is very much an unknown but critically important question. Again, I have 3 IVs. Some people say it's going to be maybe a 10-year lifespan at best for these batteries before the 250-mile range goes to 25 miles. So that is a critical issue. I know many organizations are looking, and again, I'll make an analogy with regard to e-waste. They are learning from that, saying we better understand that now. Most of the manufacturers are looking at what they need to do. Do they replace batteries? Can they redeploy these batteries on different vehicles that might be in shorter haul? The answer is no one really knows today in 2023. The good thing is, when I talk to all the people at some of the major automotive manufacturers, this is all top of mind, as well as the companies who have specialized in recycling, and knowing that there is such a shortage of rare earth minerals that go into this. It's a critical issue, but no one knows the answer. It's not an immediate concern because most of the EV vehicles that were sold in the last 10 years, pretty much they're all on the road. And so it's being carefully monitored. And I know it's a subject of planning at day one, And I think that's the big thing, is that they're going to probably, I would imagine they're going to have to disassemble vehicles. And then, just like there are ways where they can reduce a circuit board and eliminate metals from the plastic, from soldering materials, it's going to be the same thing. And we'll see. And that'll clearly be a topic that we'll bring on board in some of our other webinars, that we can give more insights into that as another important waste stream that people need to consider.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let me do this. Now there is, and I want to keep this interactive. I just want to go to Matthew Greenberg. Matthew, can you ask your question? Or maybe not. I unmuted you if you want to do that, because I'm always trying to.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Matthew, where do you work at?
It's Scripps Health in San Diego.
Oh, excellent. Yep, I know it well.
It's a big medical hospital, and we're just looking at a regular rate. We're at 28 cents a kilowatt hour to charge people for using electric vehicle chargers. And I was trying to figure out, is that a standard rate, or is there a varying rate? And someone was saying that you can charge more if they charge longer than 4 hours.
Well, Matthew, that's a good point. And I wish there was a standard answer. And I will get back to you separately with some more details. Part of the issue, it's twofold. Like in Southern California, where you've got, San Diego Gas and Electric, you've got Edison, some of the more higher utility rates. Let's say, at Scripps, and there are places like Providence Healthcare in Portland, which is some of the lowest cost energy because it's hydroelectric. Mm-hmm. So in general, there is not a specific price. It's not like gasoline where it's specific, because you have to look at where you're sourcing that. Again, if Scripps, maybe out there. By the way, how bad was the rain? Hopefully not too bad.
It's heavy for Monday most of the time, but the winds never kicked up. It didn't get very windy, which was nice.
Oh, that's good.
But
so I think
a lot of rain.
I think much like gasoline, which is where pricing is based on proximity to refiners, what you're going to find with EV charging, it's heavily based on the cost of power generation from utilities, which still power the bulk of it. What we find with regard to that is, and again, I'll follow up with you separately, we can get some data on comparable public charging rates offered by, the EVgo's, the Electrify Americas of the world.
Sure.
I don't think that there is a standard rate. It's very location specific. And then you also have to be aware of, and again, I'm not sure if Scripps, I believe Scripps is a nonprofit as opposed to.
It is.
So when you're a nonprofit, you fall into the realm of some of the NEVI funding where you have more access to that than, let's say, if you're a hospital like HCA, which is a for-profit hospital. So you probably get better access to that. When you're making it available to the public, there's more rebates. So, to answer your question, again,
that's fine.
I don't have a good answer. I'm going to follow up with you separately.
That's fine.
We know some people, but I think it's based on a number of factors, what the utility offers. Do you want to, as part of your broader corporate strategy, encourage all of your employees and partners to charge on-prem? Because we see this a lot more in urban environments, quite honestly, where individuals may have to park, especially in New York, where I'm based out of, where a lot of individuals have to park in a garage. They can't put charging in place in a garage. So they go to their workplace to try and charge. And sometimes they offer people advantages like that. So it just depends. I'm going to follow up with you separately, if that's okay.
Sure. Down the road. Cool.
I will get you that. Thanks so much. Okay.
Great, Ron.
No problem. I appreciate that. We have now someone from the LASD Sustainability, which I assume is the Los Angeles School District. Is that right? And I just anytime people ask a question, I'm getting to it, I unmute you. So can you, or else I'll summarize it. Do you want to say that?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. What is your name, ma'am?
Susan Ochoa.
Oh, hi. And is that the Los Angeles School District?
No, it's the Sheriff Department.
Oh, okay, well, good. Well, I'm glad that your colleague a little further south said the weather wasn't as bad as it might have been anticipated.
Yes. I think I need a little further on the cybersecurity needs.
Sure. So, so the point is why the cybersecurity now needs to be integrated directly with your energy plans, because as you're seeing there, there's a need for having more on-prem energy production and storage. There's also a greater need to monitor that. In the past, let's say the sheriff's office, and again, if you look at something like Southern California Edison, it's basically like, in simplistic terms, just plugging into an outlet, obviously many more facilities and vehicles, and you get the power, and that connection cannot be changed. I mean, it's just, there's no software involved. So the biggest issue why all organizations, as they're looking at deploying EV charging solutions, as they're looking at creating an environment where they have to be connected with data from the public grid, all of that creates, and again, you're in law enforcement, it creates a risk and an opening for cyber criminals to engage. There are some horror stories about cyber criminals taking over hospitals, shutting down electrical grids, affecting water treatment facilities. All of that is because, and I'll get a little technical here, but just to give you some perspective, previously a lot of these equipment incorporated something called ASICs, which are application-specific integrated circuits. And basically, what happened is you would just have a chipset and it would never change, and it just works and everyone's happy. Now it's happening with Teslas having software updates every week like our computers. Everything is software driven and everyone needs to be updatable, which means you have to get access to the chipsets that are now increasingly programmable and updatable. And so despite everyone's best efforts, when you have that approach, some of the people manning your facility need to know if you've got electrical charges everywhere, what's going on, where's there's downtime. I don't want to relate, let's say, on data supplied to us from Southern California Edison. I want to know that it's just a vulnerability, and you need to work with your IT departments to understand that and how you can protect yourself and set up the right protocols, because it's somewhat the law of unintended consequences where you put this in place. It's just another window in. I'll give you another analogy, and this may, as I mentioned, we have similar events, AngelBeat.com, that works in technology. There was a company a while ago that had a multi-function copier. It's basically like a big Xerox machine. And it was also used to print up sensitive documents, and it was on the corporate network, but they had a phone line that connected out this fancy document, this fancy printer. Instead of being protected within the company, they also had a phone line so they could fax documents. So what hackers did was they accessed this machine through the phone line. Again, this is, it's a different scenario, but now as copiers and printers got much more fancy and integrated over the network and still had a fax over phone lines, hackers accessed that multifunction copier. The documents that were printed were stored digitally, and they got access to that, and they had to stop that. And that's, in a similar sense, what's evolving now as your power and EV charging is more part of your computer network. It's just an old vulnerability that you have to be aware of. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And again, you can let me know. We're glad to help. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, great. All right. We did that. Let me just do here. I'm going through these as fast as I can, which is what I wanted to do. Now, Mahesh, could you, I opened you up to answer your questions. You asked about Georgia recycling. Do you want to add a little bit and tell us where you work? Maybe not. Are you there, Mahesh?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I hear you great. I love keeping this interactive. Where do you work at, Mahesh?
So I work for BMC. We are an electric cooperative. We are located in Marietta, Georgia.
Oh, got it.
So we have installed actually a battery energy storage system in October of 2020. It's been now almost 3 years. The system is running fine. We installed solar battery storage and the microgrid along with a natural gas generator.
I'm going to have you speak at our next AngelBeat about what to do.
Okay, perfect. So I have a question about, when we actually launched this project, we talked about the recycling, and back then there wasn't really not much information available about the recycling of the battery storage system at the utility scale level. So I was just wondering if you are aware of any recyclers in Georgia or even outside the Georgia, and what it takes, what is the cost when it comes to decommissioning the systems at the utility scale. So our system is like 1 megawatt and 4 megawatt hour.
Okay. I'm going to do this. I don't, within Georgia specifically, and again, people have to be aware of the transportation costs of batteries. A lot of this needs to be done locally, but again, where do you do that and how? I'm going to get back to you. Essentially, if you look at our website, we had Vice Commissioner Eccles, who's with the Georgia Public Service Commission, which is heavily involved in supporting clean energy, and a component of that, exactly like some of our original question about recycling EV batteries. I'll get you details on that. I know I'm pretty good at knowing who to reach out for questions, even if I don't know the answer, and I'm going to get you that. And we'll also follow up with other individuals who want to know, who might have been a little bit more forward thinking, like Mahesh, install batteries now, but now you're looking at end of life of batteries, which aren't, they're rechargeable, but after a while they're running into end of life considerations. And what do you do? And what's the value of those materials, et cetera, and how do you do that in the best way? I'm going to I've got lots of follow-ups. That's another follow-up for me, if that's okay, Mahesh.
Yes, that's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Got it. All right. Let me keep going down here while I look at different people. And there is, and hopefully my New York accent doesn't screw this up. There is Bilal and Zogby. I am sure I did not pronounce that correctly, who had questions about charging stations. Bilal, can you correct my pronunciation and ask your question as well?
Very close. Thanks, Bilal.
Right, so I got it pretty close, not too bad.
So it's Bilal Zogby. I'm with Baker Hughes in Oklahoma City.
Okay, got it.
So my question is more like about, you mentioned Navy, for example, about plans for infrastructure for charging stations. Looking online, you see like different sources that give different numbers on charging station locally and within each states. What's other than Navy as a program for developing infrastructure and getting more accurate account on how many we have in the nation and the plans for the future?
Well, I can tell you there are various, there's NEVI, there's what's called the Joint Office of Transportation and Energy. That's really the central point for driving this. Now, when I assume you're asking this question, you're talking about level 3 charging and what's available, correct?
I assume, like, do they put also level 2 in the
level 2 is so much more ubiquitous. It may be harder, but we can follow up and these things change. On one hand, as I mentioned, the mothership that's driving, especially the level 3 charging stations across the country that are available, it's all being driven largely through NEVI, the Inflation Reduction Act. And, there are various associations that are doing that track it. Plus there are, various apps, quite honestly, like when I said I have 3 EVs. So, you can plan it and you can see how all of these are changing. I'm going to get back to you. As I said, it's NEVI, it's the Inflation Reduction Act, or some of the major federal driven initiatives there. And a lot of those funds then get filtered out on a local and a statewide basis. Probably the best thing is I'm going to probably email you back. I know Baker Hughes is operations, but I'm assuming, given your role in supporting the oil industry, you're probably more concentrated probably in the Southwest. Is that right? Like I'm not
actually like, we're not like a traditional oil field services company, but we also were adding into our pipeline of technologies and solutions in the CCUS and the hydrogen and geothermal.
So let me do this.
Not only Southwest,
I'm going to get you the specific answer, because a lot of what's planned may not actually happen. So I will get you that, but I think, the best sources and starting on level 3 are much more, you can look at, again, what's going on, either from, apps like EVgo, Electrify America, as well as looking what might be planned on the, I think the best site, and I'll send you the link separately, is what's called the Joint Transportation Energy Group, that's really spearheading the federal initiatives. Because again, this is, all these EV charging expansion is driven, to some degree by the automotive industry, but in the end, it's all driven by, quite honestly, dollars and grants and programs out of DC, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, I'll get back to you.
And by the way, we have like several charging stations in our facility here. So.
Oh, good. So okay. So you're a little bit ahead of the curve, which I can imagine. It's interesting. We were talking with, on a similar industry, some of the folks at Cemex, which operates a large number of cement facilities, and what they're doing is also having similar questions when and again, they don't have as many trucks as, let's say, UPS or Amazon or FedEx, where they're building, those are the kind of companies that build level 3 charging at their facilities, because they need much faster turnaround for obvious reasons. But as far as industrial companies, they're going to be the first ones to have, electrical powered cement mixers. And so there are those things happening. I'll get back to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Now let me just do this. Let me also do this. So, okay, I've got this. Got it. So Brandy had a question, and this is appropriate, wondering, where even in California, they couldn't power the grid. And now, we're at Brandy out there in Texas as well. And I'm just going to make a general comment here, wondering, well, are there any comparable risks to what happened in California where they stopped charging? The answer is unfortunately yes. And that is also the reason why when you look at the demands of EV charging, it needs to be part and parcel of your energy strategy. Now remember, you can almost ignore EV charging infrastructure. You need an energy strategy to expand on-site production and storage, just because of wildfires, because of weather volatility, greater storms, greater demands on the public grid. So it's in everyone's best interest to do that. What I said about microgrids and batteries. EV charging is a related phenomenon that simply accelerates and increases the need for a more comprehensive energy strategy, given, the other big thing to consider is you have to look at your workforce. And we see this again more in metropolitan areas where individuals cannot so easily store or get charging for their cars overnight. A major city like New York, Chicago, etc., where so many people just park in garages, it's those kind of environments where you need to look at what you need to offer your employees as a perk, because they want to work there and they want their car charged at the facility. And who knows, maybe even charge them financially a little more from that. It's worth it, because again, in New York City, these garages have no increase available in their electrical infrastructure and no space for charging. So let me do that. Let me just now, Rick talks about, let me see if he's there. He had a question about electrifying construction. Could you comment a little more about that? If you're there, Rick, or else I'll summarize it myself. So Rick asked about electrifying construction.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Where do you work at, Rick?
I work for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, MWD.
Wow, we got lots of people from SoCal. I'm glad that the weather wasn't so bad.
Yeah, no, it was pretty bad, but we survived it. Just like everything else that happens, we had a little mini earthquake as well.
Oh my God!
But I also sit on the USGBC LA board, the United States Green Building Council board, and there's a big movement towards electrifying construction. And you mentioned on-site charging, and I'm sure you've seen the large charging units that they provide for some of these construction sites. Where do you feel we're at with that? And then the other, I had two questions. Another question is on security. You know, some of the issues that we're getting as far as applying for some of these grants is some of our facilities have security access, right? You know, we're dealing with water. We provide water to 19 million customers. So you might not be able to give public access to some of our charging facilities.
Sure.
So that's becoming an issue. So anyways, if you can answer those two. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we see it a little bit. I know in New York, and tell me if I understand this right, where they basically have outlawed gas-powered ranges and they want basically all kitchen appliances to be electrified. Is that related to what you're saying? Or are you talking about providing batteries on-prem to keep construction sites running?
Well, yeah, providing batteries on-prem, because we're moving to a lot more electric equipment, electric vehicles. We just, you know, bought a few of those Ford electric trucks. So there's these large portable industrial batteries that you're able to take to construction sites, and you know that they're not feasible yet, but you know I think we're getting there eventually. So
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's somewhat analogous to, you know, like I'm sure during the storms, you see companies like Verizon Wireless set up temporary antennas and wireless transmission sites to accommodate that. And I think, you know, maybe it's a good business we can go into, Rick, you know, it is having a fleet of trucks that can go to construction sites where the high voltage infrastructure is not in place. You know, you're building it, but to build that high voltage infrastructure, you need batteries. I could easily see that happening. I don't have direct knowledge. I know many, I'll get you some insights from some of the larger construction firms that we work with. I'm sure they're looking at that as they want to also ensure that they're, I mean, much as I was saying, like the folks at Cemex are converting their cement mixers to being electric, and you want those trucks to continually be able to operate. So you're going to have to provide some charging. And I guess that, I'll have to get back to you, but I think that is absolutely where it's going, and that there's going to be a need for temporary large scale batteries to support construction, because they're not going to be able to necessarily have those capabilities in place for existing means. I'll get back to you on that, Rick. Okay. And I'll talk to some of my other construction colleagues. What was your other question as well? I just want to make sure
it was regarding grants for some of these level 2 EV charging stations. You know, some of our facilities are just for our employees only because of security reasons.
Yeah. So we can absolutely help you out with that. We're familiar with SoCal. You know, I know LA County is doing that. And because you're I know the people from LA County, LA City, and they can provide some guidance where much of their, you know, LA County is the largest public EV charging initiative. And you're being a, you know, pseudo government water treatment utility will qualify for many of those programs. I'll get back to you on details for that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay. Let me by the way, I love getting these questions. Now we've got, you know, I always like to hear other people speak because it adds a lot. Edwin, could you ask your question about battery storage? Make sure I get this right, or I'll summarize it. Edwin, are you there? Or can you speak, or else I'll summarize it for you. So while Edwin may not be able to answer the question, let me point out what he was saying. He wondered about, could you start add batteries just for off-peak charging and basically buying or using the batteries to purchase power off-peak at a lower cost, and then for your operations during the day, use the batteries to power your operations and then recharge them out simplistically. And then also have it repurposed after your solar. Once it's there in your facility, you have battery of on-site storage, you can pretty much do whatever you want. The only thing, again, is you need the right software to ensure that you can make those transitions as to when batteries are accepting power, when they're distributing power, and where they distribute power to. Do you want it to distribute power to your EV chargers or whatnot? So all requires is just more of an architectural diagram to figure out where you can power your operations. And instead of one source being the public grid, now you have another source being the batteries and on-prem. Okay. Edwin did not have a microphone. So Edwin, if you could just reply back, and just type in your answer. I just want to make sure that we did this correctly. Let me see if Dana's still there. Dana had a question about government incentives. Do you want to ask that a little more and maybe share where you're from, Dana?
Yeah. Hi, Ron. Dana Slade with Presbyterian Healthcare Services in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. We're considering electric vehicles, but I know the incentives are evolving, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are when things might come in for a landing.
Got it. Now, I'm going to follow up with you. Much like we discussed with the gentleman from Scripps, is your facility for profit or is it nonprofit?
We are primarily nonprofit.
Fine. Okay. So that changes the complexion significantly in that you have availability. It's really not conceptually different from the state of California supporting Scripps Healthcare in San Diego and Southern California. Presbyterian there in Albuquerque would have the same benefits. And it's just, to get that, and I'll follow up with you separately. It's not a complicated process conceptually. It's just difficult to look at and imply, where you have to look at, okay, where's your facility? Where is it located? You may have certain facilities that might be in a quote unquote disadvantaged community, which accelerate your opportunity to get that funding. Maybe you've got urgent care centers in different locations. You have to look at what's feasible given your current electrical infrastructure and what's available. You have to see, are these going to be in parking garages, or are these going to be in open airs, and they're going to make them available to a larger community? So I'm going to follow up with you, but that's the gist of it. All of this is coming to a large extent out of NIVI, also to a large extent out of this Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. And simply, Dana, it's simply a question. Okay, you have to look at your facilities. What's your plan? What's your biggest bang for your buck? Is it at your large hospital? Is it at satellite healthcare facilities, et cetera? And then go through the steps, nursemaid it through the process, answer questions, simultaneously making sure that even as you secure the funding, you're calculating what our electrical capacity is. Do you have extra? Maybe you're putting in a huge MRI facility, which is going to suck up a lot of power. You have to look at those considerations. It just requires just time and effort, and I'll follow up with you, but you've got the same things that Scripps Healthcare and others have available. Okay.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay. Let me do this. We now have, we've got Laura Ann Hunt. And let me see, Laura Ann, what is your question? And it's a little lengthy.
So I'm mostly worried about or thinking about.
And Laura Ann, where do you work at again for everyone?
I'm with Lexington County Solid Waste and Recovery, and I'm with the local government, county government.
Fine. Yep, go Gamecocks, right?
Yes, sir. So we are currently experiencing quite an interest or a problem in getting rid of solar items that are coming offline. And so I'm just hoping with some of our push to implement the infrastructure that people are thinking about what happens when you know, the product reaches the end of its life cycle, because right now we're not allowed to take them, we're not allowed to landfill them, you know, they can't come apart and nobody wants them. They're kind of like, they're just things that exist that we can't.
Got it. And what you're referring to there are some of the solar panels that are now not nearly as efficient as the new ones?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to set up again a separate call with some of the people like at, you know, any of the major solar players, Solar Edge, to see how they're handling it. You know, to some degree, you know, much like we're talking about EV car batteries, the logical players who need to take the lead in recycling are quite honestly the original manufacturers who have a vested interest. Presumably these sites are still going to use power. They have a vested interest in making sure that they can replace them with new equipment. What do they do with that? How do they deal with the silicon chips? You know, if you talk to people, let's say at Intel who make chips, they recycle all their silicon. They have a nice closed loop in their facility, but how do you deal with that? You know, it's, you know, basically e-waste to the next extreme, because they are, you know, some of this equipment, it's just like a small computer on a much larger scale, but you've got similar kinds of materials that need to be dealt with responsibly. I'll get back to you. Okay.
Okay.
And again, we're going to have that covered more in detail, but what you're seeing is, again, in this world of sustainability, clean energy, all this makes good sense, but there are going to be some, like, we don't even know what we don't know. And things like batteries, older solar, which has been around for much longer, and now is the technology, at least in solar, and it is rapidly changing. You know, people are going to say, I want to replace my solar, much like I might want to replace a refrigerator. And how do you deal with that? It's very critical. Okay. I will get back to you. I've got lots of to-do lists, which I love. Got it. You know, another thing, I'm not sure he's still there, but Kyle was worried about what happens when you have a commercial office space and how do you make that happen? Again, this is why you have to look at each situation when you're talking about your EV charging, when you're talking about batteries and stuff. You have to just in general be aware of what's available in your geography. Some people may say, you know, look, for our carports, we already have a huge carport. We just want to put solar panels on top of that, have all that power get stored into, and this is what some real estate developer did. What they did was then store all that power into store all the power generated from the solar panels at a battery location 100 feet away in a basically grass that was just wasted space, and they turned that into their EV charging. So you have to look at your facility, see what's available and see what's reasonable. And it's not going to be the same thing for each person. It's got to be all customized. Let me see. Let's see. Jason has a question. Let me see if Jason's still there. Okay. Jason, he's not here, but let me see if I could see if he's joined us, if I could unmute him. But here, Jason had a question, which is, how do you go about dealing with the sourcing of power? And, you know, it ties into things like scope 3 emissions. What happens if the power you use to either provide greater energy independence so your operations can work when there's a huge weather disaster, or you can provide charging to your employees who may need your centralized facility. What if all that power happens to be coming from a coal-fired facility? Now, that is a very critically important issue. My sense is that it's from the standpoint of running a facility, I don't think you want to delay your EV charging initiatives and your greater on-site energy storage and production just because you are rightly concerned that your appropriate utility is not transitioning as quickly as enough to clean renewable fuels. I think net, the advantage of providing this flexibility, this greater resiliency, and supporting EV adoption outweighs the issues of where that power is sourced. Remember, it'd be great if you could use solar power to power all of your EV charging, but it's just not realistically possible given how many square meters, yards of solar panels you need just to charge one car. So that's really the issue. It's good to look at the upstream power sourcing, but at the same time, you have to, I tell everyone, you have to focus on what you can control, what you can do in your operations. I can't tell Con Edison in New York what they should do. Just about every utility is pursuing these clean energy, renewable energy initiatives for a variety of financial, strategic, sustainability issues. But I can't control that. What I can control, what I tell all the companies I work with, is focus on what you can control and do the best things within your power and be aware of the energy sourcing, but it's not relevant from the standpoint of on-prem energy storage and production and EV charging capabilities. So let me see if we've got, oh, Jason. Oh, there you are. Sorry, Jason, I didn't see it. Did you want to add anything else to my commentary there? I just unmuted you.
No, yeah, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate that. I guess my main comment was that, yeah, we don't want to hesitate on putting up our solar and our, our EV charging and whatever. I was just saying that, so I work for Sisters of Mercy of the Americas.
Yeah.
And we have campuses throughout the country. And when I was looking at our campus in St. Louis versus some of our campuses in New York State, I noticed that in St. Louis, their energy mix that's used there by Ameren, or whoever,
sure,
is about 6 to 7 times the emissions per kilowatt hour as our campuses in New York State. And so when trying to compute what offset or how much an EV would reduce emissions without battery storage, if we, use solar there, it really came up to a toss-up between having gas vehicles and EVs versus in New York State, where of course the EVs have a huge impact. But so that's why we would put in the solar with the battery storage, and then put up the EVs in St. Louis for sure, so we could get the solar, store it, and then use that to charge whatever EVs we have in St. Louis, so we don't have to touch that grid, which has lots of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
So that was my main comment.
Well,
there.
you know what? Again, it's important. So that comes up, quite honestly, when we work with organizations in a couple of different ways. When you're looking at greenfield, new facilities, then that is critically important because you can affect the power or the energy production sourcing for that location. And that could come up, let's say, if you want to expand your facilities in St. Louis, maybe you try and buy some additional land and basically build your own on-prem solar farm that is much more extensive. You buy a couple additional acres and suddenly you might have more flexibility to support level 2, if not level 3 charging. Maybe you've got ambulances that you want to be electric that have to be charged and do a lot of driving. So you've got some of the flexibility for doing that. Conversely, you may have facility, let's say in Portland, Oregon, which is, because of hydroelectric, is about the cheapest place for power. So it comes into it, and you have to look at making informed decisions as to what makes sense. We're going to talk about this later. Quite honestly, the most energy sustainable car that anyone can drive is, quite honestly, the car you're driving today. And that sounds a little bit cliche, but if you don't have to buy an EV car, and all of us probably in this call are pretty familiar with all the environmental, social, labor issues associated with sourcing rare earth minerals that go into this and all the complexities, we're going to talk about it later. Some people say, look, instead of offering EV credits, why don't you just offer credits and incentives for people to repair their tires and maintain their cars, so each car runs not 5 years, but maybe runs 10 years. I mean, these are some of the issues that just has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right, let me see if there's anything else. I know we did that with Dana. And we've got one final one, and then I'll finish up. Let me see if, the other thing I want to point out, like Mahesh was talking about utilities. Now, we don't focus on them as much, but one of the things I continually mention is the importance of integrating what you're doing on-prem with utilities. That is because you need to maybe buy power from them or sell power to them. And obviously, you're never going to be able to completely operate autonomously. Only in very limited instances are you going to be able to overproduce energy locally and then be in a position to always sell excess to the power authorities. But in the end, you need to work with them. They can give you advice, since they're the experts, quite honestly, in high voltage transmission, high voltage construction, to make sure you're doing it right, since it's basically their bread and butter. So if people have questions about how you do that, just let me know. We can set up discussions with a variety of people to ensure that you can get the right design in place. But just like you need the right PE, you need to get the utility involved in day one to ensure you're doing things correctly. Let me just see if there's anything else. There were a couple of people as I'm looking at this. We had our colleague from LA Sustainability. If you want to ask from the Sheriff's Department, there was one final question about shaker maintenance. Do you want to comment on that, or I will be glad to?
I was just wondering what the technology was in these charging systems for longevity of the batteries.
I don't know the specific answer. I'm sure it's dependent on the battery manufacturer, the specific battery technology, extending the useful life of batteries, be it lithium ion or some of the new materials that people are looking.
Mostly about the charging, sir.
Okay. Oh, you mean the charging?
Right. Some chargers have maintenance capabilities to remove the buildup on the plates. So I'm wondering about these higher end, newer style charging, if they're also doing the cleaning of the plates.
I don't know the answer to that directly, but I will get it for you. That's okay.
Thank you, sir.
I will make sure of that, and I'll follow up with you. Anyhow, I really appreciated all the interaction. I'm glad that we had so many good questions. It shows that this area and this interaction between energy and EV is so critical. We've got a couple more programs we're going to do later today. I look forward to following up with these individual questions. And again, our AngelBeat team under my direction is available to assist in any of these more detailed questions when you're looking at what to do in Albuquerque, what to do in San Diego, and even just researching issues, as I said, build up on batteries, what's going on with some of the new incentives, getting some feedback from Tesla and others on what their plans are for recycling. I'll make sure we share this information with everyone. I really appreciate your time. We've got a webinar that we're going to start at 1 o'clock. Focus more on recycling that we touched on here. And we're going to cover some of the similar points. You can join. And then later today, we're also going to talk not so much about operational issues per se, but how do you go about looking at issues around net zero and ESG, which are very incredibly notable and positive goals, the thing that we're going to be discussing in the last webinar is helping people understand the trade-offs, because there are admittedly conflicts and balancing acts you need to look at when you're evaluating ESG versus EHS versus DIE versus ZTE, all these three-letter acronyms. But there are issues as you're having to balance priorities and actions in each one of these areas, as well as balancing and addressing some potential conflicts or trade-offs within each one of them. So we'll cover that a little later. I really appreciate your time. AngelBeat, myself, believes passionately in these areas. We look forward to helping you and working with you in the future. And I'm glad I've got about like 20 follow-up emails I've got to address in the next couple of days. Bye-bye now, everyone. Thank you again for your time.
Bye-bye.